All right, UPSC aspirants, welcome back for part 2 of our February 23rd, 2025 deep dive into the current affairs you absolutely need to know.
We're picking up right where we left off yesterday. Ready to jump in?
Definitely, I am. Let's start with something I found intriguing. The External Affairs Minister has been using this phrase, plurilateralism. Sounds awfully close to multilateralism, but I'm guessing it's not just a fancy new word.
You're right, it's a lot more than semantics. It actually signals a real shift in how India is approaching global engagement these days. Think of it like this. Multilateralism, that's your massive UN conference, everyone trying to agree, and honestly, it can be painfully slow and not very effective.
Yeah, I get that.
Plurilateralism, though, that's more about being strategic, like forming a focused study group with people who share your goals.
Makes sense. So you're saying India is choosing its partners more carefully. But what's driving this change? Is this a new thing?
Well, the world's a complicated place, right? And the old way of doing things isn't always cutting it. Global challenges like climate change or cybersecurity, they need faster, more targeted responses.
I see.
Plurilateralism allows India to team up with like-minded countries and actually make progress on specific issues.
So it's about being more proactive, taking the lead on things that matter to India.
Exactly. It's about leveraging expertise and building strategic partnerships.
So if we look at India's response to the situation in Ukraine, is that an example of this plurilateralism in action?
Absolutely. It showcases India's multi-alignment strategy perfectly. We have strong ties with both the U.S. and Russia, and we're using those relationships to push for a peaceful resolution. We're not picking sides, we're staying neutral.
Right, keeping those lines of communication open. And wouldn't that also tie in with India's involvement in groups like the Quad and the RIC?
It absolutely does. The Quad, that's India, the U.S., Japan, and Australia, working together on maritime security and keeping things stable in the Indo-Pacific. Then you have the RIC, Russia, India, China, focused on things like economic cooperation and regional security.
So it's about being agile and adaptable in a world with multiple power centers. Okay, let's move on to something that might seem a bit technical at first, but is actually pretty crucial for India's economic development. Minerals. I saw that the Ministry of Mines just reclassified barytes, feldspar, mica, and quartz as major minerals.
Oh, you're right on top of things. That's a big deal. And actually, it links back to something we discussed yesterday, the National Mineral Policy. Remember how we talked about that?
Yes, it was a pretty significant development.
Right. This reclassification is a direct outcome of that new policy. It might seem like a minor bureaucratic change, but it reflects a shift in how India values these resources.
So these minerals are more important than they seem.
Much more. They may not be as well known as iron ore or coal, but they're essential for all sorts of high-tech industries, electronics, renewable energy, even space exploration. They're found in these rocks called pegmatites.
Wow, so even though they sound kind of obscure, they're vital for India's ambitions in those sectors.
Precisely. By classifying them as major minerals, the government is sending a clear message: these are strategic assets. We need to explore, mine, and process them right here in India.
Makes sense. So it's about reducing reliance on imports and becoming a key player in the global supply chain for these materials. Does this reclassification actually change anything in terms of who controls these minerals?
It does. This is where the Mines and Minerals Development and Regulation Act, the MMDR Act, comes in. See, major minerals fall under the central government's jurisdiction, while minor minerals are mostly regulated by states.
Okay, I see.
By shifting these minerals to the major category, the central government gets more control. That could mean streamlined approvals, more investment, and faster exploration and production.
All right, so this is all part of a larger strategy to secure India's access to these crucial materials. Moving on, what about the Prime Minister's push for a deregulation commission? What's the thinking behind that?
It's about making it easier to do business in India. Think of it as cutting through the red tape, getting rid of all those outdated rules and regulations that are holding businesses back, especially our MSMEs, the backbone of our autonomy.
So it's about encouraging entrepreneurship and creating a more dynamic business environment.
Exactly. The Prime Minister is aiming to make India a global economic powerhouse. But of course, there are always concerns about the potential downsides of deregulation.
Yeah, doesn't it sometimes lead to companies cutting corners, maybe on safety or environmental standards?
Those are valid concerns. But the idea isn't to just blindly slash all regulations. It's about being strategic and thoughtful.
So finding the right balance, promoting economic growth while still protecting public interest.
Exactly.
All right, let's shift gears to a concept that's always a hot topic in UPSC discussions: constitutionalism. The Prime Minister drew a distinction between having a constitution in practicing constitutionalism. Is that just a matter of wording, or is there something more to it?
It's definitely more than just semantics. It gets to the heart of how a democracy functions. Having a constitution that's essential, it lays out the framework for governance, defines rights and responsibilities, limits state power.
Okay, so it's the foundation, the rule book.
Right. But constitutionalism is about the culture, the commitment to those principles, not just having them written down.
So it's like living by the Constitution, not just framing it and putting it on a wall, right?
Precisely. It's about making sure those values, rule of law, separation of powers, individual rights are deeply ingrained in everything the government does, the judiciary, even society as a whole.
All right, so it's not just about the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law. Now let's switch gears to finance. The RBI deputy governor issued a warning about reckless financialization. And this isn't just about Wall Street. It impacts everyone.
You're absolutely right. Financialization basically means financial markets and institutions are becoming more and more dominant in our lives. Instead of investing in, building things, factories, infrastructure, the focus shifts to things like stocks, bonds, derivatives.
So less about the real economy and more about moving money around.
Yeah, and the danger is that these markets can become detached from the real economy. People start making bets on things that have little to do with actual production.
It's like a casino where the focus is on short-term gains, not long-term growth. And that can lead to bubbles, crashes, instability.
Exactly. We've seen this happen before with devastating consequences, the 2008 financial crisis. We need to be careful. The financial system should serve the economy, not the other way around.
Okay, before we jump into our rapid-fire round, let's touch on a topic that's really important for India: melting glaciers and rising sea levels. We talked about this a bit yesterday, so consider this a quick recap.
You're right. It's a critical issue. This new study in Nature found that melting glaciers have already added almost 2 centimeters to global sea levels since the year 2000. And for a country like India, with so much coastline and so many people living in coastal areas, this is a serious threat.
We're talking increased risks of flooding, erosion, damage to infrastructure, displacement of people.
Exactly. It's a multifaceted challenge that needs urgent attention. All right, are you ready for a rapid-fire round? We've got a lot to cover.
Hit me with it.
Okay, first up, India is taking charge at the Bay of Bengal Intergovernmental Organization, or BOB-PIGO.
BOB-PIGO. I don't think we've talked about them yet. What do they do?
It's a regional organization focused on making sure fishing in the Bay of Bengal is sustainable. They work with Bangladesh, India, Maldives, and Sri Lanka, providing technical guidance and support.
Oh, so they're all about responsible fishing practices, helping to manage that shared resource.
Exactly. They got a big 5-year project going on right now, tackling things like overfishing, habitat damage, and pollution. Big challenges for the region.
Important stuff. Speaking of the region, I saw that Vietnam just published a map of its Gulf of Tonkin baseline. Why is that in the news?
It's all about maritime boundaries. Who has the rights to what in those waters? Vietnam and China share a border in the Gulf of Tonkin, and it's a pretty sensitive area.
Right. Always a bit of tension there. So Vietnam's making a statement, laying down the law, so to speak.
That's one way to put it. It's about asserting their sovereignty and clarifying their position in these ongoing discussions about maritime boundaries.
Got it. Okay, let's switch gears for a second. I saw that traditional Indian medicine got some good press, some international recognition even.
Yeah, the National Commission for Indian System of Medicine, NCISM for short, just snagged 5 Guinness World Records.
5. Wow, that's impressive. What's the story there?
It's part of their Desh Ko Prakriti Parikshan Abhiyan campaign, which aims to promote and standardize Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha, and Soa Rigpa.
So it's about showcasing these systems to the world.
Exactly. It's a clever way to grab attention, build credibility, and potentially open doors for more research and collaboration.
Makes sense. Okay, back to economics. The RBI announced a $10 billion rupee swap. Can you explain what that means and why they did it?
Sure. Think of it as the RBI tweaking things to make sure the economy is running smoothly. A dollar-rupee swap is basically how they manage liquidity in the banking system. They buy dollars from banks and give them rupees in exchange, injecting more rupees into the system.
Okay, so it's like a temporary cash injection to keep things moving.
Exactly. And that amount, $10 billion, that's pretty substantial. It tells you the RBI is being proactive, making sure there's enough money available for lending and economic activity.
So keeping those wheels turning. Okay, what about this Biotech Triumph program I keep hearing about?
That's big news for the Indian gaming industry. It's a partnership between the Interactive Entertainment and Innovation Council and the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. And the goal is to really showcase India's gaming talent on a global stage.
So supporting homegrown talent, connecting them with international players, really putting India on the map in the gaming world.
It's ambitious, but it has the potential to be huge. And it's not just about games. It's about fostering innovation in the tech sector, creating jobs, boosting the whole digital economy.
So it's part of that larger push to make India a tech powerhouse. Now, something that might seem less exciting but is still super important, Mady launched this digital brand identity manual. What's that all about?
It's about giving the government's online presence a makeover, making all those government websites user-friendly and accessible to everyone.
So no more clunky, outdated government websites.
That's the idea. It's about making it easier for people to get the information and services they need, a key step towards a truly digital India.
Absolutely crucial. Okay, quick geography check. Australia's been popping up in the news a lot lately.
Yeah, a lot of diplomatic activity going on, especially regarding the Indo-Pacific. Australia's kind of special geographically.
Technically, there's both a country and a continent, completely surrounded by water.
And the world's smallest continent, ew, and incredibly dry, the driest after Antarctica. We're talking Indian Ocean to the west and south, Pacific Ocean to the east.
Lots of oceans. Anything else geographically that's important to know?
Well, there's the Great Barrier Reef, the largest coral reef system in the world, just off the coast of Queensland. Then there's the Great Dividing Range, a major mountain range running down the east coast. And you can't forget the Murray River, the longest river system in Australia, along with its main tributary, the Darling River.
Okay, mountains, rivers, a famous coral reef, got it. Now, a couple more quick hits. First, Vietnam released that map of its Gulf of Tonkin baseline.
Right, that's about maritime boundaries and resource rights, which always gets a little tricky when you're talking about areas with multiple countries claiming territory.
And it's not just about territory, right? It's also about resources like fishing rights and potentially oil and gas exploration.
Exactly, and that's why Vietnam's making it clear where they start.
All right, last one for now. What is extinction filtering?
It's this concerning trend where human activities are basically filtering out certain species, even in areas that aren't officially protected.
So even outside national parks and reserves, human activities are impacting biodiversity, making it harder for some species to survive.
Sadly, that's the case. It really highlights how our actions have ripple effects throughout the natural world.
That's a lot to think about. It's interesting, though, how all these seemingly unrelated things are connected.
It is. It really shows you how interconnected everything is, right? Global power dynamics, technology, the environment, social change, it's all woven together.
And that's what makes preparing for the UPSC exam so challenging and I guess so interesting, too. You have to connect those dots, see the big picture.
Absolutely. It's about developing that analytical mind, being able to synthesize information from all these different sources.
Okay, let's wrap up our rapid-fire round and then this deep dive. We talked about India's push for innovation, especially in tech and gaming, with that Part Tech Triumph program. And then there's the government trying to make its online presence better with that digital brand identity manual.
Right. Both are all about strengthening India's position in the digital world, making technology work for its citizens.
Absolutely. Okay, one more time back to geography. Australia keeps coming up, and it's important to remember how geographically unique it is.
It is. A country and a continent completely surrounded by oceans.
The smallest continent, flattest, driest.
And don't forget its strategic importance in the Indo-Pacific.
Right, which is why we see all these diplomatic discussions happening. Now, a couple of international developments that highlight how complex things can be. First, Vietnam releasing that map of its Gulf of Tonkin baseline.
Yeah, that gets into maritime boundaries, resource rights, always a sensitive issue.
And then there's this phenomenon of extinction filtering.
Right, where human activities are impacting species, even in areas that aren't officially protected.
Sobering stuff. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the must-know current affairs for February 23rd, 2025. We covered a lot, but as always, this is just the starting point.
Exactly. Now it's your turn to go deeper, do your own research, form your own opinions.
And don't forget, staying informed is a continuous process, especially for you UPSC aspirants. Read everything you can, analyze, think critically, make those connections.
You've got this.
And if you found this deep dive helpful, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to stay up to date. Until next time, best of luck on your UPSC journey.